Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Whole Wellness Mama Summit. We are unlocking the healthiest, less stressed mom in you using strategies from various wellness experts. And I am your host, Amy Nesbitt. And I am thrilled to be sitting down with Lindsay Young today to talk about nutrition and how we as busy moms can simplify meal planning in a healthy way. Lindsay is a certified transformational nutritional coach and certified strength and conditioning specialist living in Boise, Idaho. She specializes in helping busy women develop a simple nutrition and lifestyle plan to create optimal metabolic health and energy. Lindsay's approach to wellness focuses on real food in a real life context, helping her clients develop a modern approach to a healthy lifestyle that is sustainable and joyful in their homes out in the real world. And that's what we all want, right? Real life applicability. So, welcome, Lindsay.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
That's amazing. So, Lindsay, for those that don't know you, can you share your quick story of how you came to where you are now?
Yes. So, my kind of big transformation into the nutrition space actually came between the births of my first and second child. I've got three kids. And when my oldest was born, he's 15 now, we had a really rough breastfeeding start. He was tongue tied. I was so young. So, I was doing what we do as moms, right? When we have a rough experience, when we go into the second time, we go down all the rabbit holes, right? And we're like, trying to be so prepared, taking all the classes, doing all the things. And I stumbled upon this concept of breastfeeding nutrition, which kind of blew my mind. Just this, I had never put the pieces together that everything I'm eating is going to impact this little baby that I'm feeding, because that's literally how they're getting the building blocks for their cells. And that kind of blew my mind. And at that point, I had studied sports medicine in college. I was working as a personal trainer. I was in the strength and conditioning field. And I realized that all of these goals that my clients were coming to me with that I was trying to solve through exercise, that really that nutrition was at the root of all of that. So as I began kind of my journey postpartum with my second baby, focusing on actual health and good solid nutrition, my lens up until that point had been about macros and different diets, and not at all through this lens of actual health. And the accidental byproduct of that was that I got the body that I had always wanted because my brain was in the right place. I was just focused on nourishment and the type of movement and sleep and hydration and stress management. Because as moms, right, when we have that motivation of our children, we're so much more, we're willing to sacrifice in ways that we aren't when our focus is on ourselves. And so that was kind of a huge turning point for me. And I went back to school to study holistic nutrition and started incorporating that into the personal training work that I was doing with clients. And then eventually moved my business 100% virtual so that I could work with clients all over with a main emphasis on nutrition.
That's so great because so many moms want to start being healthier themselves or help their families, like you said, be healthier together. But it can get quite overwhelming by all the information that's out there. So I want to start at the basics. I know you work with clients to help with blood sugar balance because it impacts so many parts within us. Can you share why understanding blood sugar balance is so important as a foundation?
Yes, kind of the simplest way I like to think about it is that balanced blood sugar equals a balanced life. And it is the one metric that has the biggest, most massive impact on our physical well being and our mental well being. So, like the way we feel every moment of the day is dictated by what's happening with our blood sugar. And we know, kind of big picture, right, that poor metabolic health and blood sugar imbalances are the largest driver of chronic diseases, which is the leading cause of death and disability in the United States. So, kind of big picture, we see the importance of it, but then also how we feel on a day to day basis. And I know that so many moms are in survival mode, right? Like we're just kind of trying to make it from
Absolutely.
hour to hour, day to day. So while knowing, like, yes, I understand on a logical level that what is happening with my health 30, 40 years from now, like, yes, I understand logically that that's important. It really is hard to make changes on an hour to hour, day to day basis when that fear seems so far away and so far in the future, right? Like, none of us want to be a burden to our children when we're in our old age, but it's the choices we're making now that are going to impact that, right? That are going to impact our longevity. And as I've worked with hundreds of women over the last 15 years, I've consistently found this common theme, and that is blood sugar dysregulation. So, it doesn't matter what your primary complaint is, whether that is weight gain or chronic fatigue or PCOS, anxiety, tummy troubles, brain fog, trouble concentrating. But balancing blood sugar is always like it plays such a primary role in getting women back to vibrant health and a body that they love. And women will come to me with this big, long list of things that they want to change, right? Things they want to improve because they see, like, I'm going to show up as a better mom if I'm not snapping at my kids, if I have the energy to show up and play with them, if I have a stronger sex drive, if I just, wake up in the morning and feel more confident in this body that I'm in. And I'm thinking, okay, what is the one thing that will impact all of these complaints, right? So instead of coming up with, okay, this is your protocol for your energy, this is a protocol for your weight loss, this is a protocol for your anxiety and your brain fog, how do we address all of those? And that's where blood sugar balance comes in. It's so efficient that it feels almost miraculous, but that's because it's at the root cause of all of these complaints that we have as moms.
You're right. As you were listing off all those things, I was going, yep, I've heard so many of those. Right? And I kind of want to touch on as we age, because I know you said for the future too. And I often hear, well, because it's true, our bodies change as we head into our 40s with perimenopause or menopause, right? Is there anything you can add for people going into their 40s or in their 40s, if there's any different way that we should be eating or perhaps supplementing?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I definitely encourage women to be at a minimum doing their yearly physical and getting labs done and asking for extra labs, like doing full thyroid panels, making sure you have all your markers. Even if you're at a place where maybe you're in your 20s and your 30s and you still feel great, it's great to get a benchmark for those things. And then as we are getting into our, we're in those perimenopausal years in our late 30s and 40s and even going into menopause in our 50s, we want to be tracking what those changes are so that we can troubleshoot effectively, right? We want to test and not guess. And I know there's a lot of information on the internet and it feels very overwhelming. And we see an influencer say, eat raw carrot salads or take this magnesium supplement, right? And we're like, oh my gosh, they're explaining, my symptoms. That's the thing I need to do. But I really think it's important to actually test and see where your hormone levels are at so that you're making educated choices about your supplements and your food choices. So I feel like I need to, of course, say that first. The different things I see as women are aging, I think we blame a lot of things on slowing metabolism that aren't necessarily actually our metabolism slowing. Our metabolism doesn't technically start to slow until we're in our 60s. And when it does, it's by such a small amount. But what happens is that we're changing our day-to-day activities, right? We become a lot more sedentary as we get older. So I think just it's helpful for me to know that, right? Like I'm not going to blame things on my hormones that I actually like I realize I'm not as active as I used to be, or, I'm just like, I've got kids, so I've got all these responsibilities. So I'm not, as like on top of my nutrition, or I'm not as on top of my hydration. So just knowing that I think is helpful that we have a lot of personal responsibility. And then this is not going to sound fun at all, but as we get older as women, just our need for carbohydrates goes down. And it's another thing that I think we come to acceptance with. I was just talking with a client about this last week. She's like, I've just come to realize that I don't need to have oatmeal for breakfast and rice for lunch and pasta for dinner. Like, I just don't need all those carbohydrates. And it's not so much like, oh, I can't get away with them. It's just that your body doesn't have the capacity to utilize them like you do when you're younger. And so I think when we can kind of come to terms with that we're going to be getting our nutrients from other sources, it's not like that you have to eat less and starve yourself, but our need for carbohydrates really does change the older we get. So I think coming to some acceptance with that too is really helpful.
I'll start now. I'll remember that now.
Yeah. And I guess another thing I should say too is that getting in touch with this is a little bit of a tangent, but just getting in touch with your menstrual cycle at whatever phase you're at, whether that is like, you're in your childbearing years or you're in your perimenopausal years, just getting in tune with that and what's happening with your body when you're going through those 4 phases of your cycle is super, super helpful because our needs are different. Our metabolism changes as we go through those 4 phases, even like our ability to concentrate, how social we are, what's going on with our sex drive. And so I have seen with my clients that the more in tune they get with where they're at in their cycle, like, oh, okay, I'm ovulating and this makes sense that there isn't anything wrong with me that I feel this way. It's because where I'm at in my cycle, that then that makes going into those later perimenopause, menopausal years a lot easier because you're just so much more in tune with your body.
That's a great point. I've just been starting to learn about, cyclical, I guess, processes matching your phases, right? And
Yeah,
it's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating.
it is. Yeah.
So, with all that we've talked about so far, do you have a simple way to think about what we should or shouldn't be eating? Because like I said before, there's so much information out there, we can get overwhelmed. And then, is breakfast really the most important part of our day or meal of
Okay,
the day, not part of the day?
let's talk about breakfast first. So, I mean, I'm always going to say it depends, but the short answer would be yes. I think that how we break our fast, which is what breakfast is, right? It's not necessarily the meal you have at 7 a.m. It's however you're breaking that fast between the meal you had the night before and then your first meal that day. I do think it is such an important meal because it sets the tone for the rest of your day. And so the timing of when that happens is going to depend on the individual. I don't think that everyone needs to eat within an hour of waking up. Not everyone needs to fast until noon. Not everyone needs to, have breakfast at like 8 a.m. exactly. But what you do choose to have for that meal, I think is super, super important because it sets the tone for the entire rest of your day in terms of what your energy levels are going to be like, what your appetite's going to be like, the cravings that you could potentially have. So I do think it's super important. I think most women are under eating protein for breakfast. So that's, we can always play with the timing of breakfast and when that happens. And there are so many options for what you eat for breakfast. I love to have like dinner leftovers for breakfast the next day because it's so easy. Our society has kind of turned breakfast into another dessert, right? Like breakfast foods tend to be things like pastries and donuts and oatmeal that have raisins and lots of honey in. And it's a way that
Healthy
we
cereal.
can, yeah, healthy cereal. So it's a way we can set ourselves up for a blood sugar roller coaster, right, for the entire day, or it is a way that we can really set the tone for the entire rest of the day to be really smooth sailing. So that's kind of my short breakfast answer.
Yeah. So
Um,
I want to jump in right there. So it's
yeah.
kind of funny because you said, in our society, it's become this almost dessert, and it's absolutely true. And my husband a while ago read this book and started eating salads for breakfast because he was
Mhm.
inspired. And it was this weird thing to us, right? Like, oh, we're eating salads for breakfast. But then he started really enjoying that. And it just became a normal thing. And in Japanese culture, right, you have this big old breakfast, which is absolutely delicious with, like it's a full course meal. And I need to, maybe I can bring that back in because
Yeah.
normally I'm just in and out, I eat at my desk at work or whatever. So
Yeah.
I need to think about that a little more.
Yes. And I mean, so many of my clients are busy moms, right? So soup for breakfast is so easy. It's one of my favorite things is to make a big batch of like a chicken and veggie soup on the weekends. And then I'll put them in mason jars and just have them that I can grab and, heat up at whatever point in the morning I have breakfast. Or when I was working outside of the home, I would take like this little mini crock pot to heat up my soup for breakfast. So that's an easy one too, where you can get such great nutrients and not even have to make something in the morning.
I love that idea. And I like that you also said breakfast is not in the morning. It doesn't have to be tied to a time, right? I really appreciate that because sometimes my breakfast is rather late and I think I'm skipping breakfast, but I'm not actually.
Yes, you're not. Yeah. So just, and what you were asking before, just in terms of, there being a lot of confusing nutrition information out there. And I think like the good news is that like eating is something that we all do every single day. When we're thinking about like adding in an exercise routine or adding in a meditation routine or other things, it's adding something to our life, but we are already eating. So it's not like we're having to add this new habit. And I think it's exciting to know that just by putting a little bit more, thought, care, attention into how we build our plates, it can have such a far reaching impact on how we feel. And it's not like having to add this new routine. But in general, I'm just such a huge advocate of eating as much real food as possible and reading nutrition facts labels to become familiar what's actually in the food that you're eating. Like, what are these ingredients? Do I know what they are? And I don't think that a 100% processed food free diet is practical for everyone, right? Like, we
Thank
eat a
you for
lot of
saying
real
that.
we eat a lot of real food in this house. And yesterday, like yesterday there were lots of protein bars and we're at a baseball tournament and there was plenty of food that were in packages, right? But we're still focusing on, okay, how, like, realistically, how much of our diet can come from real food? Where are we just, kind of being lazy? Or where could we up our game a little bit and get creative as a way to, maybe have an apple instead of the granola bar? But really just focusing as much as we can on a real food, non-processed diet. So proteins like meat, eggs, fish, chicken, fruits and vegetables, of course, nuts and seeds, legumes, healthy fats like avocados and olives, dairy, whole grains. Those are all great examples of just food in its natural form. And while food quality is so, so important, like under I can't underemphasize that. Kind of the next thing that we very quickly want to look at is creating meals that are balanced. And this is where I'll have clients come to me and they're like, I did a Whole30 and everyone said it was going to be life changing. I've eaten non-processed foods for the last 30 days and I still like, it didn't solve all my problems. I still have these symptoms. And that's because while the food quality is so important, it's also then we need to look at having balanced plates as well. And that's making sure that our meals all contain protein, some type of healthy fats, and fiber. That's how we get that blood sugar balance that we're aiming for. So, not everyone, but most people are over consuming carbohydrates and then under eating protein. And then the source of a lot of our carbohydrates in our society is not very fiber rich. Like, I talk to very few women who are overeating fiber,
Yeah.
right? They're like, gosh, I'm just eating too much broccoli, right? Like,
Yeah.
we tend to get a lot of our carbohydrates from more processed forms. So we're not getting that fiber that's so good for our gut health and helps create satiety with meals. And we're seeing that reflected, right, in the metabolic health conditions that are really rampant and the complaints that women are having with, their energy and ability to focus and how they feel about their size and shape. So that's the structure that I teach with my clients is, and again, it's a light structure, right? With a lot of room to eat the foods that you like, right? That are in accordance with the culture that you have, that are easy for you to prepare. I really like when a client comes to me and, they'll say, okay, what should I eat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner? And the question I always ask is, well, what do you like to eat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner? Because it's so much easier to take what you already like to eat for breakfast and say, okay, how can we make sure that you're getting 30 grams of protein with the foods you already like, right? Like, how can we potentially tweak this a little bit? Or, you love oatmeal. Can we add protein powder to that oatmeal? Or can we maybe make the oatmeal size a little bit smaller? And we also do some scrambled eggs and veggies with that. So really making sure you're aiming for a minimum of 30 grams of protein in every meal is a first step that I take with my clients. And then you're getting some type of healthy fat in every meal because, especially as women, it's so important for hormone production and for satiety that we're not, on the low fat train. I think that most of us realize that was a long time ago and that healthy fats are important for us, but making sure that we can identify in every meal, okay, I had a scoop of nut butter with my oatmeal. I had some avocado on my salad. I had some veggies that were roasted in butter. Being able to see those healthy fats in our meals, and then that our sources of carbohydrates do have fiber in. And when we're eating a lot of real food, that comes naturally.
So you said 30 grams of protein. Can
Mhm.
you help us visualize? Because I'm imagining
Yeah.
people going to like measure or like go research, right? Is there a way to ballpark or figure out, okay, I'm eating enough?
Yes. Okay. And this is where, reading nutrition facts labels is super fascinating, right? And I think
It's
we
true.
all it's just not something we learn to do in school, right? Like I would have so many clients come to me and say like, okay, I had peanut butter on my toast this morning. I got my protein in. And I would say, okay, let's look at this peanut butter jar, right? Like how, like, okay, 7 grams of protein in 2 tablespoons of peanut butter. That's not a lot, right? It's not as much as you think that you're
You're going to be
getting.
eating a lot of peanut butter.
Yeah, you're gonna be eating a lot of peanut butter. So, and I know that, not we've got people who probably are going to watch this that eat more of a plant-based diet, where you're going to have to look at that through a different lens because your protein sources are always going to come combined with carbohydrates. So that it's kind of a different conversation. But in terms of like, if you're having any kind of animal protein, the size of your palm, like the size of your palm, and then 1 to 2 times the thickness of your palm is going to get you that 30 grams of protein. So if you've got a good sized piece of salmon or, cod or ground turkey or, chicken, like usually it's going to be about 2 to 3 chicken thighs or a chicken breast or a hamburger patty. That's usually going to get you those 30 grams of protein. But then other sources, if we're looking at something like Greek yogurt, like you're going to need a cup of Greek yogurt, right? Like you want to look at it and say, okay, like 1 cup is going to get me this many grams. So then maybe if I add some pumpkin seeds on top too, like that will get me a few more grams. So hopefully that helps a little bit, but I think getting familiar like with what you're already eating and just looking at those nutrition fact labels, like the turkey that we buy, like the organic deli turkey from Costco, it's like, okay, 2 slices is 20 grams of protein. So, okay, if I'm going to make a sandwich, I know I'm going to need at least, 6, and that's my only source of protein from that meal. I'm going to need at least 6 slices of that turkey in order to hit those 30 grams.
That's really, really helpful. I appreciate that. And now in my head, I was thinking, oh, I'm going to make this like a game, like
Yeah.
how close can I get to that 30 or more? Um, and also in our house, we do a lot of, okay, can you read what this thing is? Like if you can't or you don't know where it comes from, we shouldn't be eating it. So
Yeah, yeah. And it's so good that you're having that conversation with your kids now. It's such an opportunity we have as parents because I know I did not grow up in a home where those conversations were being had. And I was very overweight and unhealthy my whole childhood and adolescence and into college. And so just you don't have to be an expert in order to just get your kids thinking about what they're eating. And I think some parents are nervous because they feel like they don't know enough to educate their kids, but just creating that awareness, like
mhm.
what is in this? Let's look at those nutrition, like let's look at that ingredients list. Do you recognize those things? I think that's such a great conversation to start having when they're really young.
Perfect. Oh, glad.
Mhm.
And not to say we're perfect, right? Like you said
Yeah.
also earlier, it happens. We go out to sports games or Cub Scouts or, all the different things where there's different snacks, but
Yeah.
trying to raise people that can make healthier choices on their own too. Uh,
100%.
yeah. And I think we already touched on some of these things, but I also want to talk about what are some common mistakes or places where you see people, I don't know if I want to say fail, but they're not planning ahead for some of those obstacles that might come. Where do you see some of those and how can we
Yeah, I think in general, I mean, you're going to avoid so many like pitfalls
Mhm.
if you are planning ahead with your food. Failing to plan is
Yeah.
planning to fail. And where I see so many things happen where like the desire is there and the knowledge is there, but the execution doesn't happen is because of a lack of planning, right? We're just not, whether it's not making the meal plan or not doing the grocery shopping that's then required for the meal plan. So I think that planning in advance is super helpful. When I'm coaching my clients, one of the things I encourage them to do is, of course, a weekly meal plan. And if that feels too overwhelming, or you're just, maybe you travel a lot for work, or you've got, like I've got teenagers that maybe you make a meal plan for the week and then they eat all the food. You're like,
No.
what just happened? So maybe it's like creating a 3-day meal plan and then you reevaluate and plan for another 3 days. But just making sure that you are not winging it, right? That you're, as a mom, that you're saving your brain power for other things. Because I know that feeling when it's 5:30 and you realize I don't have a plan for dinner. What am I going to feed these people? Right? It's a source of anxiety that we can totally avoid. And it contributes to decision making fatigue when you have to decide every single day for 3 meals of the day what you're going to eat. Whereas you could sit down once on a weekend and in 10 minutes plan out all the dinners. And maybe for yourself, you plan out breakfast and lunches too, right? Just jotting down like, okay, I'm going to have a smoothie for breakfast every morning this week, or I'm going to have dinner leftovers for these days, or I'm making a big batch of soup to have so that I know I have a lunch that I can grab every day this week. So just doing that planning process is one of the absolute best habits that you can get into. I mean, it saves money, right? When you meal
Yeah,
plan, it
absolutely.
saves so much time throughout the week. And I really do think it helps to save your sanity as well when you're just planning once versus having to plan every single day.
Yeah.
And then, we talked about protein before, but I will like preach protein till the day that I die because, every woman I'm not going to say every woman, but a lot of women I work with, when they come to me, they don't realize that they're under eating protein. And then that one thing, they're like, oh my goodness, now I have breakfast and I'm full until lunch, right? And I can go from breakfast to lunch and lunch to dinner. And so like I had this woman that came to me last week and she said, my husband and I really want to start eating healthier. What are some healthy snacks that we should have on hand? And what I said to her was, if you focus on healthy meals, your need for those healthy snacks that you think are so important, like you might not even need them. Right. And if we're eliminating the need to snack throughout the day, that is, again, fewer decisions you have to make and
Mhm.
fewer, like, quote unquote, good decisions you have to make. Right. When we're actually satiated and we're filled up and energized by our food. So when we get, enough protein, we're getting enough fiber, we're getting really good nutrients in our food, we're able to go from breakfast to lunch and from lunch to dinner and not feel that energy crash and feel like we need a cup of coffee or, feel that kind of hangry feeling between meals. And then we're trying to seek out, it's the afternoon, we're running our kids around, we're trying to plan a healthy snack, but there isn't anything healthy to grab. So then we wind up grabbing for processed food. So I think, again, kind of reverse engineering when we get that protein in every meal, it helps to eliminate so many future problems. But just in general, making sure that we're focusing on good quality meals and that we're actually, like, I'm sure you see this too in moms that you talk to. Like, so many moms I talk to don't eat a lunch. They kind of
Yeah,
graze throughout the afternoon because they're so busy and they don't sit down and actually eat a lunch. And when you can sit down and have like a full-sized meal, your energy through the afternoon, your efficiency, your ability to get things done, your kindness to your children, all of those
absolutely.
things are impacted. So, I mean, I'm not going to say no snacks ever, but I think when you focus on good meals that can last you at least 4 to 6 hours, then it eliminates so many other potential pitfalls.
That's great. And I think it all ties together, right? Because protein's probably the harder one to plan for if you're just grabbing something on the go, but if we
Yeah.
could plan ahead and make sure that we are getting those first thing, then we'll see what the changes are, right? Because you're right,
Yeah.
snacking partly, I feel like snacking comes from, just if I'm around the kitchen, like during the pandemic, if I was working in the kitchen area, I might not be hungry, but I see something.
Yeah.
Um, but if I'm full, if I'm satisfied from my meals, uh,
Yeah,
it'll be
yeah. And what we were talking about too with having plans and having meal plans. One of the things that I'll have my clients do is either in the morning when they wake up or even the night before is just to decide. And if they've meal planned for the week, this is very easy, but just to kind of make that commitment to, okay, this is what I'm having for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and just to write it down. And that gives them kind of like walks them through their day too, where they're like, oh, okay, well, this was what I was going to have for lunch, but now I'm realizing I have to, I have this meeting at lunchtime. Am I going to be able to take that with me? Or, it gives you the opportunity to potentially see things that could come up. Or, oh gosh, if that's what I'm planning to make for dinner, but I haven't thawed the chicken yet, how is that going to work? So just that habit of kind of deciding, okay, these are the things I'm eating today. This is what I'm having for my meals. And then also the power of sticking to a commitment that you've made to yourself, I think is a really good confidence booster. Just making a decision, planning whatever it is, even if you're like, I'm having this great salad for lunch and I'm having this brownie, but planning it ahead of time and then following through on the plan that you made. That's where I see so much success with my clients is that confidence that they get when they know they can trust themselves. And they say, okay, I made this decision. I made a realistic plan for myself. I was able to follow through on it. And cool, now I can do this again tomorrow. And then when we string those days together, being able to see the impact of, and how you feel and how you're showing up in the world.
I love that. so often we focus on where we didn't follow through, right? Even though we did follow through on so many other things. I love the focus on making sure we're boosting our own confidence.
Yeah.
So I'd love to leave our moms with a quick action or challenge that people can perform today to start making
Mm.
changes, and ask questions or tell us how it went. Can you share your challenge for our moms?
Well, I think just on the theme of what we've been talking about, I think tracking your protein for a day would be a really good actionable step just to kind of see where you're at on a normal day. And then, that'll give you a really good starting point. Like maybe you do great with lunch and dinner, but you realize, oh gosh, I only get 10 grams of protein with breakfast. Then that would give you something right away to be able to start with. So I think that would be a good actionable step
That sounds
that you could do
fantastic.
like day that can be sprung on you day of, like, just
Yeah.
count your protein.
I'm gonna go look in my salad too because I love the salads at work where I can pick my own things. I don't have to
Uh-huh.
be like, okay, what's in there? What's not in
Yeah.
there?
Yeah, like, pick
Give me
through
more
that and
chicken,
see.
please.
Sometimes you have to ask for double.
That's right. And I know you have a fabulous free gift for everyone. Can you share what that is, as well as how people can connect with you further?
Yeah, so the free gift that I have is a 7-day meal plan. I know we've been talking a lot about, balancing blood sugar, real food, how to put balanced meals together, and that can it can be helpful to actually see that like in a written down meal plan. I'm a very visual person. So when I see it, I'm like, oh, now it all makes sense. So I would love to gift the ladies in this summit a free 7-day meal plan. So it's got breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, even a dessert. And each meal has been carefully created with blood sugar balance in mind, nutrient density, so real food, and then also ease of preparation.
Yeah,
Because
thank
I
you.
know that when we're trying to simplify healthy eating, right, it doesn't have to look like something that's on Pinterest, right? It doesn't have to be this huge effort. So I think sometimes just seeing how simple real food can be is really helpful. And all of the recipes are just naturally gluten free, dairy free, soy free. So if there are any allergies, it is naturally free of those things. And then there's also a shopping list that comes with it. So you can take that with you to the store, or you can just plug it into Instacart if you're like me and you order a lot of your groceries. So I hope that you'll see that as a tool and a resource that is life giving, that is, helpful for you. And, going into each week with a plan for healthy eating is like, it's not a secret weapon, right? But it's such a powerful tool. We want to fuel ourselves, we want to fuel our families with healthy food, but we also don't want to be a slave to the kitchen, and we don't want it to feel like a huge to do that is draining on us. So I think that meal planning is such a key to doing that successfully. So that's the 7-day meal plan that I have. As far as social media goes, I hang out mostly on Instagram, and I'm at lindsay.lives.well. And that's Lindsay with an AY. And then my website is also lindsayliveswell.com.
Beautiful. And we'll have all the links so you can click right through. But I just wanted to add on to the meal planning. Our family, every week we kind of sit down together and talk about our week coming up. And one of those is planning for the week and getting everybody on board, right, up ahead of time. And
Yeah.
it's great because then I don't have people asking me, okay, what's for dinner today? It's like, go check the board.
Yes. And then they get excited about, like, I incorporate, I'm like, what do you guys want to eat this week?
Exactly.
Right. When they have proposed an idea, and then they're a lot more likely to help. And
Yep. And
so
for mornings, I need to have things that I can prep ahead of time done so we can be in and out and I don't go, oh shoot, I forgot my breakfast at home. I have to find something different.
yeah. Yeah.
So thank you for all those great tips. Is there anything else you want to leave our moms with before I close us out?
No, but I want to thank you for putting this summit together, and just your willingness and your heart for wanting to, reach out to moms and serve them in this way. I think that it's really special and it's needed, and I really appreciate you.
Oh, thank you so much. And thank you, Lindsay, for again sharing such great information with us, trying to simplify living healthier. And be sure to check out all the places Lindsay is and come back for more amazing summit speakers.